Hi everyone, welcome back to a new live stream episode of Anabaptist World. My name is Juan Moya, digital strategist of Anabaptist World.
Hi, everyone. I'm Danny Klotz. I'm the executive director of Anabaptist World.
Yeah, so tonight we have a special guest joining us this evening, Mariah Martin. And welcome, Mariah. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you.
Mariah Martin is an Anabaptist pastor and a podcaster who lives in Goshen, Indiana, with her spouse, two house bunnies, and six outdoor chickens. She loves good coffee, making crochet plushies,
Mhm.
and reading weird books.
It's true.
Danny, do we have you there?
We lost Danny.
Okay. Well, I'll continue. That's fine. Call to Be Bad is a podcast where guests reveal a bad topic they are passionate about. These topics include bad words, sexuality, bad music, difficult parts of the Bible, and, for example, topics that run against the grain of traditional Christianity. You can watch the podcast on YouTube or listen to it wherever you listen to podcasts. So, we're going to jump in to the questions. For those joining us who might not be very familiar with you and your story, Mariah, tell us about your journey with the Mennonite Church and what inspired you to become a pastor.
Yeah, so um well, I grew up in Colorado in a very small town where if people heard that I was Mennonite, they either thought that I meant Amish and they were confused because I wasn't wearing a bonnet, um, or they thought I was mispronouncing Mormon. So it was one of very few Mennonite churches in the area, and my dad was a pastor. So I'm a PK. Shout out to all of you PKs out there. And as a pastor's kid, I saw the good, bad, and the ugly of the church. I was at once raised, welcomed, accepted, loved, and also I saw how the church was made up of humans, and humans can, yeah, I saw it all. But I got in my head that that the way to be a good person or to make change was through the church, to be a pastor. And so pretty early on, I remember this feeling of feeling called to ministry, like God was calling, like it was at once within me and outside of me, that this call to ministry. And so that's why I use the language of called to be bad, as kind of a play on that call to ministry language. And so then I went to school and studied Bible and theology, and was kind of enraptured by the Bible and everything, and it kind of went from there. And the podcast was a way to. Oh, go ahead, Juan.
I was gonna ask you what schools do you go to?
Yeah, I went to Heston College for 2 years, and then I transferred to Goshen. And then for seminary, I went to Anabaptist Mennonite Biblical Seminary. But ever since I was 14, I knew that I wanted to study the Bible, even though I knew the complicated nature of the church and Christianity. And you want me to say anything more there? You're muted. You're still muted. Sorry, Juan.
All right, my bad. Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you for your response. I think Danny, if you're good, you can pick it up from here.
Yeah, sorry, everyone. Having connectivity issues. So it sounds like you went ahead and shared about a little bit about your journey, Mariah. Thank you. And also Heston and Goshen. Woohoo! I'm a grad too. Love that. And so one of my questions is, what's different about Called to Be Bad that you think that listeners might not find anywhere else?
Yeah, Oh, that is such a good question. And I'm kind of scared to answer it because I feel like everyone's going to be like, "Oh, well, actually, in this podcast, you can hear this and this." So I don't know. It might not be different from others. But I think, yeah, so I don't know if it's different, but on the podcast, you will encounter honest stories and conversations about topics that are not often addressed in church. Or if they are brought up in church, they make people feel very uncomfortable. Like in the beginning, I say that
Mhm.
topics that make people squirm in the sanctuary.
Mhm.
And yeah, so that's one thing that you will find on the podcast. I think there are a lot of good podcasts out there about deconstructing faith. Um, and so maybe what is kind of particular about this podcast is that a lot of the guests that I bring on are Anabaptists or Mennonites, because that is kind of my circle.
Mhm.
Um, and maybe there are some Mennonite podcasts out there that are trying to push the envelope or trying to, you know, wade into the rough waters. But I don't know if them. Send them my way if they exist, because I would love to talk with people. Um, so yeah, that's something you'll find on the podcast.
Yeah, definitely.
And another question that links to that is, what will listeners find there that they wouldn't find somewhere else?
Yeah, my hope with the podcast is that it is both at once like educational and or entertaining, but also that people can start to find a community, or they can have those moments of like, oh, okay, it's not just me that really likes to listen to this music with these lyrics, you know, it's not just me that likes these weird books, or you know, anything that we bring up. I say that I hope that the podcast helps create a community where people feel less lonely for just being human, because a lot of the things that often Christians or faith folks are punished for are part of humanity. And so, yeah, that kind of community, or that kind of not feeling alone, so alone, is what I hope people encounter on the podcast.
I love that. Um, I'm sure they're all your favorites, but what is there an episode? I guess I have a twofold question. One, if you're talking to someone new and they've never listened, do you have an episode that you recommend people start with?
Mhm.
And two, what's one that like is really sticky in the sense that like it's still sticking with you and you're still thinking about it?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Some people start at the very beginning and almost like obsessively like need to listen to every single episode. And I mean, if that works for you, that's great. I think that the purity culture episodes, it was back when I was doing 2 parts. I think that's a good place to start. A lot of people are really drawn to the episodes on sex and sexuality, understandably so. Um, and I would say whatever topic you find most interesting or compelling, or the one that you're like, what is this going to be about? You know, start there. Um, and then an episode, there's several that have stuck with me. One is the episode with Cedar on being non-binary in the church, and that was also, I think, the first season and a 2-part episode, because Cedar's story it's just so raw and real and humanizing. And I think if people don't understand topics around gender or what it means to be non-binary, that's a fantastic episode. Also, Cedar and I just really clicked, so that's one that I think about often. And the one called Justice for Every Body, Every Space Body, with Nikisha Elena Alexis, because she talks about veganism, and that is an episode that I felt most like personally challenged. I've always said well, not always. I recently started calling myself a bad vegetarian because I saw online someone say like, I'm a vegetarian until I feel like eating meat, and that's kind of where I am. And so Nikisha really has challenged me, and I hear her voice in my brain when I'm like going to the grocery store and I see meat, and I'm like, oh, not food, not food. So that's 2 that have stuck with me.
That's awesome. Thank you. I'll hand it to Juan.
Yeah, so what keeps you motivated to keep going, and what words of advice you want to give to the people tuning in right now? I know there's uh, maybe some of the episodes can be a little bit controversial,
Mhm.
so I think what you know what there must be some criticism in both sides. You know, there must be some good feedback that you receive. Also, some people who are a little bit more close-minded. What keeps you motivated to keep going despite all those things jumping at you?
Yeah, I actually have not gotten a lot of negative feedback, and I take that as a challenge that like the podcast I need to keep pushing, or yeah, I don't know. But I would say what motivates me is honestly the messages and like people coming up to me and saying like, "Oh, I feel like I know you because I listen to your podcast," and like it's really sweet moments like that. Or they'll say, yeah, I didn't know how I felt about a certain topic, and this has been really challenging in a good way for me. That keeps me motivated. Um, Advice that I would give: some people have what's called imposter syndrome, where they have this voice in their head that says like you're not good enough to do that. I don't have that voice, or it's kind of broken, and so I just kind of do things. And if I'm bad at them, then I don't do them anymore. But no, I um, I don't know. I just kind of do things, and I read a book. Oh shoot, now I don't remember what it was called, but it was talking about how the world needs your voice and your stories, and there's no better moment than to put it out there right now. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna start this thing, and so I just kind of dive in and see what works. Um, and people want to share their stories. That's why podcasting is so beautiful, because it's so mutually beneficial, because I get to meet these amazing people and they get to promote their ideas and work. And yeah, so it feels like a win-win, which keeps me motivated.
Um, yeah, I love that you don't have imposter syndrome. I wish everyone didn't. That'd be great. Yes. Okay, I have a little bit of an off script question here, and that is if you had like a dream guest on, is there anyone that you would just, it feels like a hard get, but you would love to have them as a guest on your
Oh,
podcast?
that's a good one. I have thought about that a lot. Um, as you were talking, Brene Brown's name shot up into my brain, which is
Hmm.
interesting. Because I haven't thought of her as a guest before, but as you were talking, that's the name that popped up. But I would love to have Anne Lamont on, and I actually have messaged her, and I knew it was just a shot in the dark, but but I have had like crazy success just kind of emailing people and being like, "Hey,
Yeah.
do you want?" And Anne Lamont would be amazing. She kind of is in that niche of, while being like a very deeply spiritual person, she's also just like a very human person and very real. And I think her writing is beautiful. And yeah, so I think Anne Lamont would be really cool.
That'd be amazing. I love Anne. Oh, okay. Well, back to the regularly scheduled programming. Um, you mentioned Nakisha's work, and she's phenomenal and really, a really, I don't know, talented and impactful speaker and organizer and communicator. But is there anything else that has really touched your faith in this journey? Something, I don't know, yeah, in any way you want to take that.
Sure. Yeah, I think the podcast has complicated my faith and expanded
Mm.
it in really beautiful ways. It has challenged me to kind of walk through those doors, and um, yeah, I mean, it's just giving me this beautiful gift where I get to talk with these wonderful people and hear their stories, and I get to share it with the world. Um, I think I also have, and I don't know if this is, I don't know if I can separate the podcast from my current pastoral position, but it has kind of um, etched away at this desire to have like theological debates with people. Like I'm just not
Mm.
I'm just not as interested. maybe on social media if I'm feeling particularly like sassy. But
Right.
I'm just not interested in debating um, people's humanity anymore,
Mhm.
or
Mhm.
just having these kind of heady theological conversations that are far removed from reality. I'm more interested in people's stories and their day-to-day lives. I'm getting excited, Danny. You got me all worked up. Um,
Yes.
and, and yeah, I just don't have as much space for kind of theological pretentiousness. I don't know if that's a word.
Mhm.
Pretension. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, another question that I had is, well, how is being a young pastor? And you mentioned, I don't know if you mentioned this live, but you've been a pastor for 6 years or so
Hmm.
there in Goshen. How is being a young pastor affect, your spirituality, because you have to guide other people? Is it something that is challenging for you? Is it something that you see like an opportunity to share new perspectives to the world? How does that translate, the podcast translate to your church?
Yeah. Well, I started the podcast in a different church setting than I am in now. And in the beginning, I wanted this podcast to kind of be a bridge between maybe more traditional and more progressive views. And and so that's kind of that was kind of the birthing place of the podcast. And now I'm in a different setting where I am just very much thrown into the day-to-day life of people, people from different socioeconomic backgrounds. And what was the question again? How is pastoring kind of affected the podcast?
No,
Or
the question is, how is being a young pastor, how is that an opportunity to maybe expand people's minds? How does that affect you,
Mhm.
guiding other people? How do you bring some of the things that you bring from the podcast to your pastoring?
Okay, got it. I got it now. Um, well, I think I've as I've said, well, I don't know if I've said it on the podcast or not, but I view preaching in particular not as me telling people what to do or how to think. It's more presenting ideas and different perspectives, and then people do their own critical thinking, which is not been talked a lot about within like traditional Christianity. And so, yeah, I want to, yeah, I want to present ideas and then people make up their own minds. I view pastoring as kind of walking with, or, uh, yeah, kind of, oh, what's the word? Kind of bearing witness to people's pain, joy, sorrow, whatever is going on in their life. And I think, I mean, that translates a lot to the podcast too. The podcast is a way to present ideas. And I often will say, you can listen and hear and hold an idea without accepting it for your own life. And that also doesn't mean that you have to throw it away and say, like, that is bad, or judge the other person. You can hold different beliefs without accepting them.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's also kind of like, just from the title, it's kind of a call to be, in a way, kind of rebellious, right? So I mean, to be, there's a need to be rebellious, to hear another perspective. I mean, if unless you come from, I don't know what kind of background you come from, but uh, called to be bad just for me resonates as, like, okay, there's something interesting going on here just from the name.
Hmm.
You're gonna touch on, I don't know what kind of topics you're gonna touch on, but it kind of like, just the name kind of gives that kind of rebellious feel to the show, which I find interesting. And I
Hmm.
think that's why part of why we wanted to reach out to you, and give us that perspective of how is being rebellious okay in a setting where, we're often called to be still, be
Hmm.
quiet, be silent. So how do you think that rebelliousness affect affects our world perspectives nowadays, especially for young people. I think it's a call to, it's an opportunity, to be rebellious, to question
Mm.
the status quo, to question our belief systems. So I don't know, what are your thoughts on that, on being rebellious?
Yeah, I like that. Um, yeah, I think that there's an important distinction between being rebellious for the sake of being rebellious, because the rebel still acknowledges, like, if their posture is in being against, then it's still the thing or the person or whatever they're against still holds all the power. And so I like to think of it as speaking truth to power and bearing witness to stories that aren't often centered. And if that is rebellious, then something needs to change. I think about it as kind of Jesus's flipping the tables. Not comparing myself to Jesus here, but he was saying, like, what is happening here is not okay. But he wasn't doing it just to create a scene. He was very intentional. It was a planned kind of protest, so to speak. And so, yeah, I believe in speaking truth to power and speaking up when I see injustice. And I try to do that through the podcast with stories, because I think stories are where, I don't know, the heart of our faith and humanity is. And I see that throughout Scripture. So that's something that I hope that people also take from the podcast is kind of my guests' love for, I mean, maybe not all of them, but okay, I'll speak for myself. My love for spirituality and faith. And just because I'm pushing the envelope and I am kind of bumping up against the powers that be, that doesn't mean that I don't love God or the church or faith. I just see where there is pain and where there needs to be change. And if that is rebellion, then great. That you can think that. Yeah, but I don't see it as a bad thing. It's a good bad thing. We're playing with the word bad here.
Yeah, of course. I mean, to Juan's question and what I know about you, Mariah, and your work, it feels like you are doing, like, you're following in the line of prophetic work. Um, and you said Jesus, it's okay. That's what we're supposed to do, right? Is take Jesus seriously and to try to emulate him. So it's okay. We'll do it.
Yeah.
So that's how I've
Yes.
seen you take, you know, called to be bad. It's not in a way to just be bad for bad sense or just to be rebellious because you like a fight. It's about pushing people, having tough conversations, and opening up space for those tough conversations. My two
Yes.
cents, I suppose.
Exactly. Yes, the tough conversations, the hard questions, the questions that people have on the inside, but they're too afraid to ask because, like, what will people think of me? And I'm like, yeah, let's talk.
Awesome. Is it my turn, Juan? Okay. All right. I've been looking.
Uh-oh.
I'm sorry. Using my phone and
Okay.
someone's trying to call me. That's so annoying. Um, I have a quote from Anne Lamott, and I've been trying to find it ever since you mentioned her. Um, but I can't find it quite yet. So the next question that we have here is what's coming up on the podcast that you're really excited about?
Yes. So we're gearing up towards season 3. We have a few episodes. I mean, season 4. We have a few more episodes left in season 3, and I have an episode with Amy Jill Levine, who is a Jewish scholar of the New Testament, and so that was really exciting to have her on. Talk about, like, dream people or having amazing people on. I had Dr. Will Gaffney on, which was amazing, and also to have Amy Jill Levine is pretty incredible. So I was very excited. for those two incredible women. And so, yeah, Amy Jill Levine is coming up. And I haven't told people this. This is kind of like a surprise, but I'm also going to have Girl Named Tom on the podcast, which is awesome because one of the previous live streams that you did was with Girl Named Tom. So that's a cool moment of connection. But they're going to come on the podcast, and we are likely going to talk about what it means to be famous, or what do you do with fame. So those are some things that I'm excited about. I have other things that are kind of in the works, but I haven't like got it like solidified, so I don't want to say anything yet. But did you miss the last bit, Danny, or did you hear?
I
She can
missed
rewatch
just.
it.
I can rewatch it. Sorry, I did miss a little bit, but thank you, Mariah. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Juan, any other questions that you have?
Yeah, well, we're closing up our live stream, and we want to know, where can listeners find you, and how can they help support your work?
Yeah, so you can listen to the podcast. Well, you can watch the podcast on YouTube. My mom always loved like seeing me and seeing the guests. So if you want to watch it on YouTube, you can. Or you can listen to it wherever you listen to podcasts, Spotify, Apple Music, Apple Podcasts, whatever it's called. All those places. And then to support the podcast, you can follow it on any social media, Facebook or Instagram. If you subscribe on YouTube, even if you don't watch on YouTube, if you subscribe, that would help. Because if I hit 1,000 subscribers and a certain number of views, then YouTube will monetize the podcast, which would be really cool. So you can follow it or subscribe on YouTube. And you can also rate and review the podcast. I think specifically it's helpful on Apple Podcasts. It gets you like onto the main page. And so leave an honest rating, reviewing. If you like it, don't like it, go leave a review, that kind of thing. Send it to a friend. I find podcasts a really great way to open up a conversation. So if you're like not sure how you feel on a certain topic, or you just want to gain kind of some starter information, sending it to a friend and saying like, hey, listen to this and then we'll talk about it, is a really great way to open the door. And it's more digestible than a whole book, oh gosh. Okay. So rate and review. And then if you really like the podcast and you want to see it continue, you can go on to Patreon and become a patron, which is essentially a sponsor. You can do a monthly monetary sponsorship, and then you get little perks. Like I put on extra little clips from the podcast and like other fun things. I also want to create what I'm calling like a baddie council or a baddie group or something, where we meet once a month and we kind of discuss what is coming up on the podcast. A way to keep me motivated. Call back to how to stay motivated earlier. And so if you're interested in being on that baddie council or group, you can let me know. You can email me, calledtobebad@gmail.com. Or if you have any bad topics that you want to hear about, you can also message me or email me there. Whew, that was a long spiel. Sorry. Let me figure it. Was that everything?
We put the links in the comments for the
Okay.
Patreon to support Mariah and her podcast.
Yeah. And did I see something pop up? Did someone have a question or something?
Yeah, somebody commented, Phil Swank. No question, just a positive response to Mariah's affirming and empowering voice.
Thank you. That's awesome.
Yeah. And we're sending this out. Brene and Anne, you can hear us. You know where to find Mariah. Hit her up.
I'm going to think of so many other people after we hang up, but yeah, no, that would be great.
That's okay. It's unlimited. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So. Good. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Sorry, got too excited again. Thank you for having me. This was awesome. I'm going to be jazzed all night long from this conversation. So
yeah, thank you all who joined tonight to this live stream. Please keep coming back to the future live streams. I know Mariah has a lot of exciting new episodes on her podcast, Called to Be Bad. So make sure to follow her. on the social media channels she just shared, and support her on the Patreon link that we just listed here. So, Danny, anything else for our viewers before we say
No,
goodbye?
thank you for joining. And yes, please support Mariah. And Mariah, we're big fans at Anabaptist World. So wish you just so many blessings and good like vibes along the journey. Okay.
Bad vibes, you mean?
The best. Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
Awesome.
Oh, thank you all for tuning in. Have a great night.
Keep being bad and beautiful, everybody.
Bye bye.
Bye.